Hi everyone. Can I have your attention now, if I may? Now, I'd like to introduce to you again, to my left is Dr. Susan Carland, lecturer at Monash University, frequent guest on several television programs, including The Drum, and have you been on a project? You have been on a project, that's good. Your husband let you on?
I'm only allowed on when he's not on. That seems to be the producer's rule. We can't be on together.
Does that mean that you're getting, they think you're gang up on everybody?
Maybe.
Welcome.
Thank you so much, thank you.
And to my right and your left is Marie-Claire Jang. Welcome.
Thank you.
Now I'm going to give you this microphone and I'll go right over here. I'm going to get, first of all, Susan, to introduce yourself a little bit about yourself and tell us a bit about your background and who you are.
Thank you. It's not particularly interesting. I think you've pretty much said all there is to say. I'm an academic at Monash University. That's my dad right there and his lovely partner Jan. I became Muslim when I was 19, so I wasn't born into a Muslim family. I became Muslim when I was 19. I'm a mum, I have 2 children, 2 big children. My eldest is 19, my youngest is 15, so yeah, I've been married for 20 years, so that's been a while. I don't really know what else there is to say about me. I'm a pretty unremarkable person, but I'm looking forward to having interesting conversations with you all today.
We will, I'm sure, all disagree, and especially your father, and Jan will disagree with you about being unremarkable. Particularly, you've written a few books, and you've also been known for your activism in Islam, particularly for women. Tell us a bit more about that quickly.
One of the areas that I research at university and focus on is sexism against Muslim women, both inside the Muslim community but also outside the Muslim community. I did my PhD on that, I've written a book about that, but I also, the area that I research now is looking at effective ways to counter any sort of discrimination. I think we're all really interested in how do we stop racism, how do we stop anti-Semitism, how do we stop, homophobia, all these things that we're all really concerned about in society. But what concerns me as an academic is that we don't actually have a lot of evidence for what works to stop these things. How do we actually change people's minds? So that's what I'm researching at the moment. I'm on a 3-year research fellowship here in Australia looking at that, and I'm also going on a Churchill fellowship later this year to look at that overseas as well. So those are the things that I'm really interested in as a person, and I think, like I said, I think these are the topics that you see them come up again and again in the media, they come up in politics. I think all of us are very concerned about this, rightly so, but we don't really know what to do about it. So I'm interested in well, how do we solve this problem?
Thanks, Susan. And that's part of what we're here for today, to talk a bit about dealing with and addressing those isms that we face. Now, Marie-Claire, you're someone who's had to deal with that as well. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Thank you. As you all know, my name is Marie-Claire Jang. I've been in Australia for over 11 years now, and during my stay in Australia I've worked mainly in the community service and mental health. I recently launched my children's book as well, and I recently became an author, and our skin color, so it was inspired by my son and one of my friends as well, when her daughter came home and she went to kinder the first time and realized that she was different from everyone, and she got home, she's like, Mom, why am I different from everyone? And she got panic. She's from South Sudan, so she got panic, and she called me because we're very close, and she said, Marie-Claire, Alod came home and was asking all this question and I don't know what to say. And I'm like, well, I'm panicking as well, because it's something that I've had my fair share of racism in Australia, so when things like that come, that trauma kind of like hit me. And I said to her, let's just give her time while we find answer to the question. If she comes back again with that question, then we'll figure out what to do. And then the next week, my son came. It was my turn. I was chopping tomato, and the moment he asked that question, I was just like, stop. And I went down and gave him a hug, and I said to him, let's have dinner, and then I'm going to look for answer to your question, and then we can talk about later. So yeah, that was how the book came about, and the book is just a resources to kind of navigate that conversation between parents and their kids when they start talking, when they start asking questions about our differences, not just our skin color, but we can use that book as well to refer to all the differences that we have. And also when I was doing research on what resources I can use to navigate that conversation with my son, and I realized that most of the books out there, not really in Australia, in America, those books are there to empower kids with brown skin or dark skin to be proud of their skin color. And I said to myself, I don't think I want to empower my son, because by the time I start doing that, I think I will be pointing at the fact that there's something wrong. So I decided to write a book instead of empowering, creating unity among our children, so they grow up and build a society that they don't see skin color, but they see what people have to offer. So that was the reason as well that I wrote the book. So and I hope it turns out well. And also I've also started a non-for-profit foundation as well to subsidize childcare for migrants and refugee families. I have lived experience in that, being a migrant in Australia, and you're not eligible for those support. It makes it hard as well to be able to work and and be able to afford all the other things as parents. So it's been a really tough time for me, being a single mom and working and paying almost half of my wages into childcare. So yeah, so that's me. Yeah.
So you've started this foundation. Now, unfortunately, you, one of the directors of the foundation, was not able to join us today as she's unwell. But you've also starting a new foundation as well, another group which is supporting students as well.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, so it's called Student Employment Services. I remember last year, December, when I lost my work rights. My visa came back and I wasn't not really allowed to work, but I had just 3 months visa, and it's hard to find employment having a 3 months visa because most of the time I get rejected because of my visa. So I decided to buy a cleaning business with James Cleaning. So I bought James as a cleaner. So when I was attending the training, and I'm someone that when I go somewhere, I listen carefully, and I'm always innovative, always thinking, always wanting to create something. I've been like that since I was a little girl. So a lot of the questions that people were asking during my when I was attending the training was they were having difficulties finding workers. And the main reason was that they will mostly use Facebook and Gumtree and could not afford Seek, Indeed, or other employment service out there, because I myself, I tried to register to find workers, and it would cost me about $500 just to keep an ad for 30 days. So I said to myself, I'm gonna maybe do something different, make it more affordable. Things are getting expensive now, so I think people appreciate something that is more affordable. So I started working on a business called Student Employment Services. It's not just for students. At some point, we've all been students in our lives, and most of the work out there, a lot of the employees are students. They've been present or past students. So that was why I called it Student Employment Services, and also for international students as well, to create a platform for them to get a job easily. So what we do is a membership platform. So instead of paying $500 or $600 for 30 days, you can pay $600 or $700 for 1 year, and then have the platform to yourself, so you can post job and use it anytime that you need it. So that's what that business for. And the website is done, so I'm actually building an app for it. So it will be ready in about December, so I'll be launching it early next year.
Wonderful. So you've been doing some really creative, innovative things, which is fantastic. We're going to hear more about your experience in a moment. But Susan, as a Muslim woman, you would have experienced various forms of isms, if you want to call it, Islamophobia, all sorts of other things, and both within, as you said, within Islam and outside. Tell us a bit about that, and then tell us, what have you come up with? You said one of your passions is finding ways to build bridges and to address that in our community. Tell us what you found out as well.
Yeah. Well, in terms of the isms that I face outside the Muslim community, it's, it would be what you expect. There's Islamophobia in society, or you could call it anti-Muslim sentiment. And what's interesting about it is that discrimination against Muslim women is a specific gendered type of Islamophobia or anti-Muslim sentiment. So Muslim women we're sort of seen in this weird way, on the one hand as being oppressed and uneducated and all these sort of things, but on the other hand, really contradictorily, we're also seen as being a threat and something to be frightened of. So it's this weird dichotomy of us being oppressed on the one hand, but also overpowering. We're seen as, it's a very illogical way to be seen, to be honest. How can you be both of those things, and yet Muslim women are? So there is that kind of, negative stereotype there. And then inside the Muslim community, I think it's important to make the distinction, and I think a lot of, particularly some of the women here might be able to relate with what I'm saying, because when I wrote my book about sexism that Muslim women face inside the Muslim community and outside the Muslim community, it was based on a lot of research with other Muslim women who are trying to fight sexism. And what was interesting to me was how all the women I spoke to said, my religion's not the problem. God doesn't see me in a sexist way. My religion's not the problem. The problem is what, no offense, men have done to the religion. We've had male scholars, male priests, rabbis, whoever, this is across the board as well, unfortunately. Religion is a social institution. And like all social institutions, our own human prejudices are brought to the endeavour. And particularly throughout history, if you've just really had men doing the interpreting of holy scriptures, whether that be the Bible, the Torah, the Quran, whatever, they're going to come with their own lens to it, and their own prejudices and their own desires to it, and how when they read a verse, they're going to say, oh, this is what God means. But as we've seen in Christianity, Judaism, all the faiths, including Islam, women have said, hang on a minute, that's actually not what that says. When we look at the original language, that isn't what was said there. Or why, when you could interpret it this way, have you interpreted it that way? Why did you come to this conclusion on this ruling when we could have easily come to this? And what was interesting for me when I was, going around talking about my book, how often I'd have Christian women, Jewish women, Buddhist women come up to me and say, it's the same for us. What you're saying is exactly the same struggles that we have. And so the isms that I face within the Muslim community, I think it's important to make the distinction between what happens in the community by the people as distinct from the religion. Because the women that I spoke to, the Muslim women I spoke to for my PhD, and I spoke to women around the world, they said, our faith and God is too important to cede to the patriarchy. We're not letting men take that from us as well. Like, our faith is our own, and we don't believe sexism is what God wants for us. So it's important that that message is not emptied out from how these women experience the faith as well. And please don't take this as me attacking men at all or anything like that. This is absolutely not the intention. We'll probably talk about this later. We all come with our prejudices to things. I come with my own prejudices. Marie Claire would too. We all do. We all bring our own very human, fallible lens to interpreting religion. And I guess the job for all of us is to be aware of that and work out how can we not do that, I guess, that's the challenge. I think you had another question, but I've already forgotten what that was. Sorry, Peter.
What about the positive ways you've been researching how to address it?
Yeah. It's not as easy as you would think, would be what I would say, and maybe that doesn't surprise any of you, because I think part of the tricky thing with prejudice is that in some ways humans have been wired to be prejudiced for tens of thousands of years. We've been wired to see our tribe as safe and anything outside that is dangerous, and this is, you know, these are mental shortcuts that help us quickly understand an environment and who is safe and who's not, and anyone we see is different, our brains immediately go, oh, that's not safe. So in some ways we are needing to work against our biology. That being said, I don't think it's impossible at all. You know, I don't think it is. I think and we can see that. We've seen, all of us have seen in our lifetimes the way attitudes towards women have changed. I'm sure all of you here have got stories. My mum, you know, who'd be the same generation from you, talks about how when she was younger, you know, about getting like a bank loan in her own name or a bank account, or how hard it was to get a divorce, the jobs that women weren't allowed to do. You know, we've seen these things change in our time. And the jobs that men can't do as well, weren't allowed to do. So we've seen those sort of things change in time, so I do think we can. The things that seem to work are people connecting as people seem to be one of the best things. Just knowing, and I'm sure, like I know this from myself, I'm sure you all have had this experience as well, where these people from a different group, and that different group can be someone that looks like you but maybe from a different political persuasion. When you actually sit and listen to them with the most good faith interpretation, how we don't have to come away agreeing with each other, but we can go, okay, I can understand why you think that, and even if I can't even understand that, I still like you as a person. I don't need to write you off as a person. So human-to-human interaction is important in this specific context. One thing that seems to really work is when we can create empathy in people. And that is part of the human thing. So when people share their stories, often about their stories of difficulty, that will often creates an empathy. When you hear the horrible story of what a refugee had to go to come to Australia, that can make people really rethink how they might see asylum seekers, for example, or the discrimination that a gay man experienced in the 70s. People might go, okay, wow, I didn't realise it was like that. You know, those sort of things can help. And one other thing that we found that seems to work is very gently. This can't be done like a hammer over someone's head, but if we very gently point out the hypocrisies in people's arguments. So to give you an example of that, if I you know, stood here and said to you, it's so unfair the way people blame Muslims for terrorism, it's so unfair the way you do it, you know, you guys might be sitting there thinking, well, that it's fair enough, you know, a lot of terrorists are Muslims, for example. And so the example that was given in one study was that when those same people were said, yeah, but is it fair that you'd be blamed for Martin Bryant, who committed the attack in Tasmania, or the Christchurch terrorist attack? He was a white Australian guy. Would it be fair for you to be blamed for that? And they go, oh, well, no, it wouldn't. So if we can gently try to tease out our own hypocrisies, but like I said, it can't be done. We can't smash people over the head with it, because that will actually make people dig their heels in more. But all of this, all of those little tips, you know, empathy and hypocrisy and whatever, it has to be done through a human relationship. These things can't be done by a corporate, you know, when you're at work and you've got to do the OHS online things to make sure that you're not being sexist at work, whatever. Those things don't work. In fact, studies have shown us that those forced workplace training modules actually make people more racist and more sexist, because people dig their heels in. They don't like the implication that, are you saying that I'm racist? Are you saying that I'm sexist? And there's no human interaction. You're just learning it through a computer screen. The challenge that I think I would say about the human interaction model is that, take Muslims for example, or Jewish people. There are so few Muslims or Jews in Australia. Like, if I asked you what percentage of Australia do you think is Muslim, does anyone know the answer? What would you take a guess? If I said, just take a guess, what percentage of Australia do you think is Muslim? What would you guess? 5%? 5?
If I said
2? 2? Yep, any other guesses? We've had 5 and 2. Any other guesses? What do you reckon, Peter?
going back a few years, it was about 0.5%. I think it's grown a little bit more since then, but not a lot more. 1.5, wow.
Yeah, it is really low. It's about, in the whole country of 26 million people, there's only 813,000 Muslims. Now what's interesting though, when you ask the average Australian, what percentage of Australia do you think is Muslim? They wildly overestimate. 10%, 20%. I was in a speech once and I asked the audience that question. They said, I think it's about 50%. I said, lady, look around. We are not half this room. So there's this perception that there's a lot more of us. Because there's so few Muslims and there's even fewer Jewish people, what that means is the vast majority of Australians will never have a Muslim friend, colleague or neighbour. They just won't. They'll even less likely to have a Jewish friend, colleague or neighbour. So that makes it really tricky with that human interaction, but then I think what that adds extra pressure to is the role of the media. That means the average Australian, the only source of information they're getting about Islam or Judaism is through the TV, through the newspapers, and if those stories are often quite negative or they're only political, that creates a problem because no one can say, well, there's that awful story in the news about Islam, but my friend Muhammad, I know is different to that, and so there's a mediating force. If you don't have that friend, if there's no Muhammad working with you, if no one living next to you is called Muhammad, it can be really difficult to undo that.
Thanks, Susan, on all those points. It's really good. And one of the point you make about the relationship you develop, one of my friends many years ago was the Imam in Shepparton, and he used to talk about the difference, even within different religious traditions in Islam, and ranging from the expectations of women, some being a lot more relaxed. So if you get the version of Islam from Asia is a lot more relaxed from the version of Islam from parts of the Middle East, particularly. And he was highlighting that. And I'm often reminded too, my mum grew up having to wear hats to church and gloves and things like that. And we often forget such expectations, and as you pointed out, the changes for women have occurred. Marie-Claire, for you, you've had to deal, as you've pointed out, the isms yourself, more, not so much in terms of belief systems. Now, for both of you, you're both visually, people see where you come from. Now, tell us a bit about the isms you've experienced, but also how you have found, have helped resolve some of those barriers.
Yeah, I remember my first year in Australia. One of my friends got us a ticket to attend, Australian Open, and we went there, and I think the tickets were very expensive, so we had to sit, I think, the first 2 rows in front of the court. And we got there, and everyone was seated. Obviously, your ticket gets checked outside before you even walk in, and so we all sat down, we settled in, and there was this lady that was working there. I think we're the 2 black, dark-skinned people that were there, and she probably walked up to us and said, "Can I please have your ticket?" And my friend that was there, she's been in Australia, I think almost 5 years then, so she's been used to it. For me, it was like, And she's like, "No, why do you want my ticket? I haven't seen you check, other people's ticket. Even if you want to start, you have to start in front and then come to us all from the back, but I haven't seen you, done that." And she's like, "No, I'm not going to show you my ticket." And the lady insisted, and she just walked out. I'm like, "Where are you going?" She's like, "Give me a minute." And she's like, "Can I please speak to the manager, someone that's involved?" "Yeah, I'm in control." And so they referred her to the manager, and we went there and she explained it, and she's like, "This lady here is, I think she's racist because she didn't ask other people for their ticket and she came to us. That means we can afford it, and we're not, you're not supposed to be sitting here because we can afford, obviously the tickets are expensive, we can't afford it." So the manager apologized for, that, and that lady was asked to go home straight away. I was like, okay, this is good. So that scenario there, I think what really helped with that scenario is the communication that happened there, because sometimes if we just stay and do nothing or just show your ticket just to create peace as well, other people will go through that as well, not just us. So having that, creating that awareness that was what is happening, and there's someone in the team that is being racist and they have to deal with it. I think that was a really good way to deal with it, and I learned a lot from that myself, and I've always learned to communicate when I felt like I've been treated differently or not being attended to if I'm supposed to. So I remember my first when I moved to Bahrain, I think last 2 years, when I got the job with Uniting as a youth facilitator, I decided to move close to work because it was in Chapel Street. So I got a unit for my son and I went to, that was around November, and so they keep sending me email about Christmas party, and so I walked to the receptionist just to get few information about the party, what is happening, and she said to me, "Oh, you're not invited." And I'm like, "But I've been receiving emails, saying that you're invited to this party." She's like, "No, you're not invited." I was like, "Okay." I walked home, and then the next day I was dropping my son off, and luckily for me that there's someone say hi to me, because a lot of the parents there, they've been like, even if you say hi to someone, they just ignore you and just walk past. No one will say hi to you. So this lady, she saw me, she was like, "Oh, hi, you new, I haven't seen you before." I'm like, "Hi, you're so good for someone first time to talk to you." And she said, "Oh, are you coming to the Christmas party?" I'm like, "No, I'm not coming. I was told I wasn't invited." She's like, "Oh, that's not nice." I'm like, "Yeah, I don't know." So I was like, "Oh, it's good seeing you, and hopefully we can catch up as well." And so the next day I got an email saying that, "Oh, you're welcome to attend the Christmas party." I'm like, "Oh, what happened?" And she was like, "No, you just invited." Same receptionist. I was like, "Oh, okay." So I sent the text. I saw the lady. The next day. I said, "Oh, guess what? I've been invited to come to the Christmas party. Then that means I'm gonna meet you, and we can know more about each other." And she's like, "Oh, that's nice. I had to speak to them because that was not nice. What they did to you. That was a time for you to meet other parents and create that relationship and have conversation, and they just didn't want to do that." So I felt like that was not nice. I needed to talk to them and to fix that, and I felt relieved that happened. And I know I wasn't happy about the situation. I would have just decided, no, I'm not going to the party because that happened. But I decided to go there so they could get to know me, those parents, rather than just looking at me and the way I look, and just judging me. But just to show them and have that conversation that there's just more to me than just my skin color or the way I look. So it was really good, and at the end of the day, I had to met few good parents there. We had good conversation, and till now I have few parents that my kids still hang out with, so which is really, really good, yeah.
So in the midst of that, what you found is one, that you held people with power to account. So one person was challenged, and the system there backed you. There were people that backed you. I know from my experience growing, that didn't always happen. And it's only a fairly recent experience for many people. And then you also found, in this case, you had someone advocating for you as well. And so in that case, when you have people of goodwill supporting you, that helped to break down those barriers as well. So you had the personal things where we can do that ourselves. But when you have others of goodwill doing it, so that's when others who are not party to it can support those who are struggling. Now, you're a woman of faith. You're part of our Ringwood community. Tell us a little bit how your faith, what is it in the heart of your faith that inspires you to keep going through the difficult things? And I'm going to ask the same question of you.
What has inspired me as a woman of faith? I grew up, my family, we were brought up as Christian. My mom and dad were Christian when I was born, so we have been taught about Christianity, and we went to Christian school. And there's one thing growing up that I realized that is really important is having faith as well. And that has kept me going. I know I have been through a lot in my life, but one thing that has kept me going is just believing that things will change if we keep making an effort for it to change. And that's why I decided to write the book, because for me that was part of a change that I was looking forward to. I know it's going to be a slow process, but I'm looking at starting it from the children that we have at the moment, so that when they grow up, they don't face what we have us that at this present age we face as well. And so the book is just a way for me to pass that message and have that faith that when they grow up, things will be different their time. Yeah.
Your turn. What about you, and how does your faith inspire you? For Marie-Claire, it's about making a positive difference. What about you?
I think, definitely the making a positive difference is absolutely a part of it. And I think also, for me, we believe in Islam, and it's probably similar in other faith traditions as well, that everything that happens in your life, good or bad, positive, struggle, hardship, ease, everything is just a part of the divine plan to bring you closer to God. That's it, all of it is that. And I think part of the struggle with suffering is when it feels pointless. When it feels like there is no point to this suffering, it's just meaningless pain. That can be quite an overwhelming sensation. But Islamically, or as Muslims, we believe that everything that happens is just designing you to bring you closer to God. And it's what you do in those situations that matters. And that's the good things as well. If you're given a lot of money and you're given a lot of position, well, what do you do with that? Do you just become a jerk who's rich and who squashes the people around you? Or do you use your money to help people? Do you bring other people with you? Do you use your influence to try to create change? If you've got a great family, then what are you going to do with that? But similarly, if you have these really difficult things happen to you, what are you going to do with that? How will you use that to, first of all, bring you closer to God and your Creator, but also help it to make you a better and more empathetic person? I think so often the nicest people you meet are the people that have been through the hardest things, and it's because it creates that empathy in us. So I think the role of faith is that it gives a meaning and a sense to things, to otherwise things that could just seem nihilistic and anarchic. And then also, exactly like Marie-Claire said about, we have to do good with the time and the resource. Whatever we have an opportunity to try to improve things. All of us are role models, whether we like it or not. We're either just good role models or bad role models. Because everyone's always looking to each other. How did you behave in the car park when that person cut you off? When the wait staff got your order wrong, how did you behave? Your children are looking at you, whether they're younger or older. How did you behave in that moment when you were stressed or tired or upset or feeling sick or whatever? Your neighbours are looking at you. We are all role models. We just have to make the choice about, well, am I going to be a good role model or a bad role model? And I guess as people of faith, everybody here, you could say, well, as a Christian, well, the role model that you would look to is Jesus. How would Jesus be this, and how can I be most like that? Islamically it's the same. How can I live up to the best standards of my faith, even when I don't want to, and in fact, particularly when I don't want to?
In all of our traditions, both the Christian, the Islamic, and the Jewish traditions as well, the faith, there is a sense of the prophetic very strong, which is all about calling us back to what the heart of God. I often use the phrase the heart of God, and Muslims will talk about being subject to the will of God, but we will often talk as Christians about living out the heart, and in a sense there's a lot of similarities in what that means. So I'm going to call it a pause at the moment, because some of you have been able to order your meals and others haven't. So we're going to pause, and if at your table you've got some questions you would like to ask either Marie-Claire or Susan, on your tables, on the paper, the running sheet, you can write on the back a couple of questions. In about 15 minutes, we will come back and answer a couple of those questions if we get a moment to do so. So, and also on your running sheets, there's also some information about some questions that you can talk about in your table groups, and I invite you to do that with each other along the lines of the similar questions that I've been asking Marie-Claire and Susan as well. So please have a look at that, use it as a guide. If you haven't ordered, you can either use the QR codes or you'll have time to go and line up at the register over there for organising your meals. So please do that if you want to do that too. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Question first of all to Marie-Claire in what you're trying to achieve. How can we help you in what you're trying to achieve in the community? And the sub-question to that is ditto to Susan. So how can we help you?
So what I'm trying to achieve with this book is basically create the awareness about us being different but the same, and also get it out there as much as possible so families can have that safe space to talk about different skin color in a more convenient and comfortable ways. And also, it's not just for children for this book, it's for the whole family as well, because we all are new to this, and we don't, like for me, even when my son came home, I was panicking, I was stressed because I didn't know what to say. So if you guys can help spread the message, introduce the book to people, I want it to go as far as it can, not just within my community, but to other community out there as well, so that we can, I know we can change things straight away, but I'm hoping that as we go from here, things can keep getting better and better, and that, for example, my son, I'm looking at him as well, so when he grows up, or as he's growing up, he should be in a society where he's not being treated the way I have been treated. So I think that's what I'm looking for, and that's what I'm hoping for that change to happen, and as much as it can happen slowly, but I'm looking forward to them having a better society than we have at the moment.
Thank you. Susan, what can we do?
All right, well, I'm going to piggyback on the end of what Marie-Claire just said then, because I really encourage you to buy Marie-Claire's book today, if you can. The soft copy one's only $20, and you might think, oh, but I don't have grandchildren that age or whatever. If you want to know what you can do to help, buy this book, donate it to your local library, donate it to your local school, donate it to the local kindergarten. Because remember how I was saying before, we know one of the best things that can help to break down barriers is human-to-human interaction. But the problem is, not everyone is going to be able to speak to Marie-Claire or her son, or maybe they might not have a South Sudanese friend or whatever, for whatever reason. Books are amazing bridges between people who can't be together in person. Books are very patient teachers. You can read a book again and again when you're trying to get the message. And so this is a great way. If your child might go to a school or a kinder or whoever, wherever they go, perhaps there isn't a lot of multiculturalism, perhaps there is. Either way, this is a great way for the kids to learn about people who are different to them without that person even necessarily having to be there. So I really encourage you. She's got a few copies here. She's too shy to tell you. I'm not too shy. I really encourage you, buy a copy of the book, and like I said, donate it so this message gets out there. In terms of myself and what, you don't need to do anything to help me. The fact that you've invited me and Marie-Claire here today, I have so much respect for you all that you've been willing to do that. Like, these conversations, I know this sounds tacky or trite, but these are the conversations that change societies. These are the conversations that improve things. And it's on the Muslim community, we invite you guys back to our community. And the Jewish community, we invite you. And the Jewish community, we invite me. All these things. It's through these conversations. So I guess if there was one thing any of us can do, it is be willing to have conversations with people who are different to us and be okay with being different. There's no point having a conversation with someone who maybe looks different to you but thinks exactly the same as you. We want to hear from people who think differently to us and be okay with not agreeing on everything. During lockdown last year, I found out that a friend of mine was adamant anti-vaxxer, like lying on, like had a fake vaccine passport, went to the protest in Canberra, and I was really surprised because I didn't know anyone like that. And when she told me, I was like, okay, I want to hear all about this. Tell me why you think what you do. And it was said with genuine respect and genuinely wanting to understand her. And when we finished our conversation, I wasn't suddenly an anti-vaxxer. I still disagreed with her, but I understood her and I could respect her as a human being, and I could understand why someone would come to the conclusions that she did. So I guess just keep having things like this would be what I'd say.
So we're not really just talking about the isms associated with Islam or racism or any of those other things, or even the issues that we face as Christians and all those sorts of things. And we're talking about conversations across the board in terms of understanding how we relate to one another. One of the things that strikes, you mentioned earlier about how in the media this week, there's so many things about how people are erecting barriers between each other. And one, someone mentioned before, I'm going to insert it into the conversation here. Those of you who haven't heard, Archie Roach passed away, and he's one of those people that's been working through his life about restoring connection across Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples. And he did it through his music, of course. But it's that conversations together across the board, whether it be through working with people who are Indigenous or any other way of operating too. So we have another one. There's more comment at first, and I'm going to see if I can summarise it. The media in all of this, they can have a role which is positive or negative. I must confess, when I hear the negative, it gets a bit too harsh for me, and I tend to close off. What is your opinion how to handle some of those things? Sometimes I do find it wearing. What's your approach and how to engage? Now, you're a woman who engages in the media. I'll start with you, Susan, then I'll come to you.
So how to engage with the media, you mean? Or?
In a way, and handle that sort of extremity and that extremity. Like, for instance, I'm going to stereotype that Sky After Dark tends to be one that is perceived as being fairly black and white and rigid in their viewpoints.
I guess I'm in two minds. On the one hand, I feel like you do, and I would never watch Sky After Dark. Every now and then when I flick it on just to try and see what's going on, I'm like, come on. But I'm also very aware that people would think that about probably the shows that I watch on ABC or whatever, and be like, oh, you and your left-wing bias. So it's, I understand that there is that. I guess my unease is, I think that two things can be true at once. I do actually think we need to live in a flourishing democracy. We actually need lots of different types of media, of people saying things that we don't necessarily agree with. I actually think that's really important. What I don't like are external influences on the media. I feel very concerned about the Murdoch influence on media, and I think that's something that's a different kettle of fish, and that worries me. And I think that needs to change. I guess the reason I'm reluctant to sort of say, well, what we need to do is shut down all the crazy right-wing media is even, and having been on the receiving end of some of that sort of media many times and really horrible personal attacks, I wouldn't want to close it down, because I think we're kind of in a time at the moment, and perhaps this is generational, so perhaps you're all protected from it, and I really but I see it in my generation and I see it in students that I teach at university. We're in a real time of just wanting to shut down all the things that we don't agree with. We want to shut down the voices that we don't agree with, and we just need to, that can't be said, and that these things cannot be said, and also these things must be said. A compelled speech that I find really concerning. That worries me. Because I don't think you actually end up changing anyone's mind when we forbid certain things from being said and from forcing other things being said. I think it drives beliefs underground, so it's all simmering below the surface and it's never being engaged. So as much as I dislike some of the media that I see, and like I said, I've personally been on the receiving end of some really toxic stuff, I also think that within reason, I would never want to say that I think that that needs to be cut off, because I don't think that's actually good for society.
You're in tune there with, I remember years ago going to the Holocaust Museum, and the people, at that time there were still people who were staffing it who had been through the Holocaust themselves, and they said themselves that they would defend a Nazi's right to have a public speech. As much as they may have hated and disagreed with that, the freedom of speech to them was critical, so that that space did not revert to the suppression of one group over another. So it's a really hard conversation to have. It's not straightforward. And what about you, Marie-Claire? You're moving into the media space as someone beginning, and this is a frightening world, it can be. How do you engage with this, the public space you see, which can be quite frightening and threatening too?
It's frightening, just thinking about it sometimes. I'm not very good with public speaking, not to talk of media, but I'm someone that is very good with challenges, and I know that when the time comes, I'll find a way to push through that. But like Susan said, the media is not that we have to cut off so many things, because still the media still produce some good stuff. I remember when I was doing research, when I was writing the book, I was doing some research online, and then I came through an article they wrote about there's a model called Winnie Harlow. So she has a skin condition called vitiligo. And I have, like, there's a character. Yeah. So if you can see, I don't know. There's this little girl, the character included. So I was inspired by that. So what the media did, they wrote this article about her and all these amazing things she's doing in the community with her work and all the stuff. And they end up saying that, oh, she has a skin condition, she's suffering from a skin condition, which is what she's going through, and she wasn't happy with that at all. She said, I'm not sick, I'm not on any medication, I'm not at the hospital, I'm at home in the society doing the things that I'm supposed to do. I'm very healthy. And that got me thinking, and I looked into it more, and I said to myself, if we want to start putting brain or names on things when we write about other people, and I think that's not a good way to pass messages, because she said if you want to write, for example, Gigi Hadid, you won't say, oh, she's a white person, or, you know, like start putting label. So when I look into it, I said, if we want to look at it that way, then we all suffering from something, because I have dark skin because I'm suffering from excess of melanin, and a white person who have white skin, they're suffering from shortage of melanin. So if we want to look at it that way, it means we're all suffering from something. So, and that was why I wrote the book and include her in it, just to create that awareness that that's her skin color. She has a skin made of brown and white, and that was how she was made, and that's how she was supposed to look like, not that she has a skin condition. And it's important to address it that way, because kids, if she's a kinder and they say, oh, she has a skin condition, then kids start looking at, feel sorry for her, or look at her like, you know, there's something wrong with her. Meanwhile, there's nothing, because she's basically healthy. So I think media should not brand things or call people with certain names or certain things. I think, because even in news, they talk about, oh, if something happened and the black community is involved, or the African community, you know, So it's important that we stop generalizing stuff and look at individual. I always focus on looking at individual, what they have to give, what they're offering, and what is happening in their life. I think it's more important than what they're going through or how they look.
And that means to take time to listen,
Yeah.
you know, and if a person is experiencing some sort of condition, they may not experience it as a disability, for instance, or they may be experiencing it as a problem. And part of the thing is what you said, is to spend time to listen and to understand what people are going through and hear their stories. Lastly, I'm going to finish on this point because we're running out of time and your dinner's getting cold. So just quickly, your faith. The question that's been asked here for you is, you changed from a Christian tradition to become Muslim. What was it about Islam that you wanted in it? And I'm just going to keep it positive, that you found drawn to. And what is it about Christianity that you are passionate, keeps you in the faith? So why you changed and why you're still?
Well, I think the first thing to say is that I had a really positive Christian upbringing. Like, it couldn't have been better. I had a
You have to say that Dad's there.
But it's true, and I've said it in other interviews when my dad has not been there. It's true. I had beautiful. I was raised in the Uniting Church up until I was 12, and then I went to the Baptist Church. And both experiences, I was just surrounded by such good people, the kind of people that embody everything you would want in a good Christian community. Like good, kind, supportive people in both denominations. It was so. It's really important that I say that I had a really great Christian upbringing. There was no deficit model in my conversion. It's important that I say that. I think it was, for me, when I was 17, I just started to question why I believed what I did, and I wondered, is it because I sincerely think it's true, or is it just what I've been raised to believe? I don't know what other belief systems are out there. What else do I want to look into? And so I did start to look into other religions out of curiosity. I thought maybe I'm actually an atheist. I don't know actually what I think. And I think, it was at 17 that I started to investigate, and I finally converted at 19. And I think that's the age, again, when I look at my first year students at university, this is the age of a lot of big life changes. They'll join the Socialist Alliance, they become vegan, they join the Liberal Party, the Greenpeace, or they become Muslim like I did. I think it's a very idealistic age. It's an idea when you're working out for yourself what you believe and who you are and how you want the world to be and how you want to be in the world. And so for me, it just got to the point where, to my surprise, the more I learned about Islam, the more sense it made to me. It was a real surprise to me because I didn't know much about Islam before I started looking, and what I thought I knew looked very negative, so I wasn't interested in Islam at all. But when I actually started looking at what the faith taught about itself, as opposed to what I saw people doing in the name of Islam or what I saw in sensationalist media, I realised, actually, this makes a lot of sense to me. And so when I was 19, I converted.
Thanks, Susan. I was just so fortunate that growing up, we had both Islam and Christianity in Cameroon, and we lived together as one. Like, there was no bias or any, differences there. We grew up having, I think one of my aunts, she was Christian and her husband was Islam, so we have that intermarriages as well, and they both practice both faith and they live together like really well. I remember when they have like we call it Muslim Christmas and New Year, things like that. We all do dress, in the Muslim outfit with the hair scarf. I used to wear a lot of hair scarf when I was growing up. I used to love it. And also they used to say when I put on hair scarf, I look like a Muslim, like when I was looking. So I used to love it. So we used to dress, that way. If we see our friends when they're celebrating, we all eat together, practice the same thing. I used to remember even saying some word in Islam, sometimes going, like sitting down and visiting mosques as well. So it was just so fun that we had the freedom to practice. If you want to practice both faith, if you want to, and also have friends and family that we celebrate everything together. So it was just something that I grew up with, and I really enjoyed that. But Christianity has been something that I was born into, raised into, and when I lost both parents at the age of 18, And I was the eldest, and I have 3 brothers, and we were abandoned, and the only one that I could rely on was God. And he was the only person that I would sit and talk to and feel like he listened to me, because I could see miracles happening. Because being here today, for me, I still consider it like a miracle, because growing up when you were begging for food to eat, moving from one house to the other just for them to pay you education for you to go to school, and going all through that and still being able to be in Australia, I've found that as a miracle. And when I pray, I know that he listens to me and he responds to the things that I ask for, and that has kept me going, that faith, and I depend and rely on him so much, so that my son as well is growing up through that faith. So that's one thing that's kept me through Christianity, that I know that there's someone that I can always run to. He will not judge me, he will see me for who I am. And if I ask something that is really out of my way or anything, he will say, yeah, there you go. And I dream, and I see things. So that's one thing that has kept me going, my faith.
Well, thank you very much. Now, your books here, you've got copies of books here. If you would like to purchase a copy, speak to Marie-Claire afterwards. You can buy one for your children or grandchildren. It would be really wonderful. And she'd love to talk to you more about that. And in your sheets that you have there in front of you, there is a prayer as a blessing as you conclude today. So please read that before you go. And thank you everyone for coming and sharing this. This will be, as you see, is videotaped. We will see if we can clean up the sound a little bit, but if not, it will be on our website later today, and you'll be able to go and view and listen to it at any time that suits you then. So please come and have a check of it later as well. Thank you, Susan, and thank you, Marie-Claire. And I've got a little something to say. I'll give you back your book. I do hope you both like chocolate.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh, you do. A little thank you for coming today. For you both. Some chocolates you can share with the family or not. Make sure Wally doesn't know about this until they're gone.
These are staying in the car.
He's staying in the car. And there's a small little orchid for you for your house as well. Thank you very much, and please show our appreciation. Please do continue with your meals and refreshments, or however long you would need to.